Life has a strange way of teaching lessons without ever announcing them. One of the deepest lessons many people learn, often through quiet pain rather than loud drama, is this: the more special we make certain people, the more ordinary we can become in their eyes. It's not a rule written in stone, but it's a pattern that repeats itself in friendships, relationships, and even family bonds. At first, everything feels balanced. Care is mutual, respect flows both ways, and time spent together feels meaningful. But slowly, almost invisibly, the balance shifts. In the beginning, giving more feels natural. You reply faster, you forgive sooner, you compromise more, and you put their needs ahead of your own. You tell yourself this is love, loyalty, or sincerity. You believe that if you invest enough of your heart, the other person will see your value even more clearly. But life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, instead of appreciating the effort, people get used to it. What once felt special starts feeling normal to them, expected even. Human psychology plays a quiet role here. When someone is always available, always understanding, always giving, the mind stops registering it as something rare. Scarcity creates value, while constant availability can reduce it. This doesn't mean kindness is a mistake, but it does mean that kindness without boundaries can be misunderstood. The other person may not consciously decide to treat you as ordinary, it just happens over time, like a habit forming without notice. Another painful part of this lesson is silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the silence where you notice you are the only one initiating conversations, the only one checking in, the only one trying to keep the connection alive. At that point, the realization begins to sink in. You start asking yourself difficult questions. If I stop trying, will this relationship still exist? Often, the answer hurts more than the question itself. What makes this experience even heavier is that it usually happens with people we trust the most. We don't overgive to strangers, we do it with those we care about deeply. That's why the disappointment cuts so deep. It feels like a betrayal, not necessarily because the other person did something cruel, but because they stopped doing something meaningful. They stopped seeing you the way you once believed they did. Over time, this lesson changes the way you look at relationships. You begin to understand that being special to someone is not about how much you sacrifice, but about how much you are respected. True value is not created by exhaustion, by constantly proving your worth, or by shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort. Real connections don't require you to disappear in order to be loved. This realization often comes with guilt. You wonder if pulling back makes you selfish. You question whether protecting your time and emotions is a flaw. But maturity teaches you that self-respect is not selfishness. It is necessary. You cannot pour endlessly from a cup that is never refilled. And those who truly value you will never expect you to. Another hard truth is that not everyone is meant to stay. Some people enter your life for a season, not a lifetime. When you try to force permanence, you end up losing yourself in the process. Letting go doesn't always mean cutting people off in anger. Sometimes it simply means adjusting expectations and accepting reality for what it is, not what you hoped it would be. As this lesson settles in, you start to choose differently. You become more mindful of who deserves your energy. You stop chasing people who don't meet you halfway. You learn to observe actions instead of clinging to words. Promises sound nice, but consistency is what truly matters. Anyone can say they care, fewer people are willing to show it without being reminded. Interestingly, when you stop trying so hard to be special to everyone, you often become more valuable to yourself. You rediscover interests you neglected, dreams you postponed, and peace you forgot existed. You realize that your worth was never dependent on how others treated you. It was always there, quietly waiting for you to acknowledge it. This lesson also reshapes how you love. You still care, but you care with awareness. You give, but you no longer empty yourself completely. You stay kind, but you don't ignore red flags in the name of loyalty. Love becomes something shared, not something you perform alone. And if someone makes you feel invisible despite all your efforts, you finally understand that the problem was never your lack of value. In the end, life's lesson is simple but profound. The right people will never make you feel ordinary for being sincere. They will recognize effort, honor boundaries, and reciprocate care. And those who only value you when you're giving endlessly were never meant to hold a permanent place in your heart. So if life has taught you that making people too special can sometimes make you feel invisible, take it as wisdom, not bitterness. Learn, grow, and move forward with grace. Value yourself enough to know when to give, when to pause, and when to walk away. Because the moment you stop treating yourself as ordinary is the moment the right people start seeing you as truly special. As time passes, this lesson doesn't fade, it deepens. You begin to replay moments in your mind, not to torture yourself, but to understand where things slowly changed. You remember the days when your presence mattered, when your absence was noticed, when your words carried weight. And then you notice how subtly it all slipped away. No single argument, no dramatic goodbye, just a gradual dimming of importance. That is often the most painful part, realizing that distance can grow even in silence. You start to understand that people don't always lose interest because you did something wrong. Sometimes, they lose interest because you did too much right for too long without asking for anything in return. You became predictable in your kindness, reliable in your sacrifice, constant in your availability. What you thought was building trust slowly turned into something else, something taken for granted. And when something is taken for granted, its value is rarely questioned until it's gone. This awareness can make you angry at first, angry at them for not appreciating you, and angry at yourself for allowing it. You may think, why didn't I stop earlier? Why didn't I speak up? But growth doesn't happen in hindsight, it happens in awareness. At the time, you were acting from a place of sincerity. You believed love meant giving without limits. There is no shame in that. The mistake wasn't loving deeply, the mistake was forgetting to love yourself with the same intensity. Slowly, you learn the difference between being kind and being disposable. Kindness is a strength when it is balanced with self-respect. Disposability begins when you tolerate neglect, excuse disrespect, and silence your needs to keep others comfortable. Many people don't intentionally use others, they simply follow the path of least resistance. If you always adjust, they never have to. This realization teaches you to listen differently. Not just to words, but to energy. You notice who shows up without being asked, who checks on you when you're quiet, who celebrates your wins without jealousy. You also notice who only appears when they need something, who disappears when you need support, who responds only when it suits them. These observations become quiet teachers, shaping your standards. Without bitterness. With time, you stop explaining yourself so much. You stop proving your worth through effort. You understand that anyone who truly values you will not need constant reminders of your importance. They will feel it naturally. You learn that love, friendship, and respect should not feel like negotiations. If you have to convince someone to care, they already don't in the way you deserve. Another layer of this lesson is loneliness. There is a moment when you pull back, set boundaries, or stop overgiving, and suddenly the noise disappears. Messages slow down, invitations fade, and for a while, it feels like you lost everyone. But what you actually lost were people who were attached to your availability, not to you. This kind of loneliness is uncomfortable, but it is honest. It creates space for clarity. In that space, you meet yourself again. You reconnect with thoughts you ignored, emotions you buried, and dreams you postponed. You realize how much energy you were spending trying to be understood by people who weren't listening. You discover peace in not explaining, not chasing, not forcing connections. And slowly, solitude stops feeling empty. It starts feeling safe. This lesson also changes how you react to disappointment. Instead of breaking down every time someone fails you, you adjust your expectations. You stop expecting depth from shallow connections and consistency from inconsistent people. This doesn't make you cold, it makes you realistic. You still hope, but you no longer depend on hope alone. You watch, you observe, and you decide. Over time, your circle may become smaller, but it becomes stronger. You prefer one genuine connection over 100 superficial ones. You learn that quality has nothing to do with numbers. A single person who truly sees you is worth more than many who only see what you can give. This understanding brings a quiet confidence. You no longer fear losing people who don't value you, because you know what it costs to keep them. Perhaps the most powerful change is internal. You stop measuring your worth through other people's reactions. Their distance no longer defines you. Their silence no longer shakes you. You understand that people's behavior is often a reflection of their capacity, not your value. This awareness is freeing. It allows you to love without fear and walk away without guilt. In this stage of growth, you also forgive yourself. You forgive yourself for overgiving, for ignoring signs, for staying longer than you should have. You realize you were learning, not failing. Every experience added a layer of wisdom you couldn't have gained any other way. Pain became a teacher, not a punishment. And then something beautiful happens. When you no longer try to be special to everyone, you naturally become special to the right ones. The people who enter your life now do so with clarity. They respect your boundaries, appreciate your presence, and reciprocate your effort. You no longer have to dim yourself to be accepted. You are valued as you are. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care wisely. You give, but you also receive. You listen, but you are also heard. You compromise, but you are not erased. Relationships become partnerships instead of performances. And if someone makes you feel small, invisible, or ordinary despite your sincerity, you don't argue, you simply step back. In the end, this extended lesson is not about blaming others. It's about understanding yourself. It's about knowing when to hold on and when to let go. It's about realizing that being special is not about how much you give, but how much you are valued. And most importantly, it's about choosing yourself without losing your humanity. Life may have taught you this lesson through disappointment, but it leaves you with strength. You walk forward lighter, wiser, and more aware. You stop begging for space in places where you were never truly welcomed. And you finally understand that the people meant to stay will never make you feel ordinary for being genuine.